It's been so long. In Adrienette Fanfiction, Part 20. Adrian sighed and rubbed his eyes. His newfound struggle to stay awake was getting way too normalized. Someone was gonna notice. Then again, he was always tired with his busy life and secret superheroing, so perhaps no one would figure it out. You know, scientists say all-nighters aren't good for your health, a teasing and concerned voice said from his right. Ah, right. The sunken eyes could get past every student and teacher at school, except for one. Something tells me you're guilty of a couple late nights, too, Adrian shot back. A small smile was all he could muster at the black-haired girl. She shrugged and pulled on an innocent look. Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe every week, she said with a smile. Adrian looked at her pointedly. Now that's bad for your health. She giggled and continued her brisk pace. Despite the fact Adrian was taller than her and was still rapidly growing, the Chinese Parisian was a very fast walker. Sometimes, if not most always, he struggled to keep up with her. What? Too fast for your taste? She threw back behind her shoulder but slowed down nonetheless. Thanks. Not all of us are speedy, he said with a laugh. I know. Don't worry. I'll always wait for you, Marinette said coolly, not even seeing the flush upon Adrian's cheeks. He'd been doing that around her a lot more. Thanks to that night under the stars, say, a week ago, Marinette and Adrian became oddly close in a short amount of time. It wasn't like they weren't friends before. They just talked more now, walked together to class, and were always seen together before and after school. Something about that night just made them click unlike ever before. Adrian basically bounced around his room after he got home, shoving a pillow in his face to muffle the screams of joy. Plag was groaning and growling about the sissy-prissy sappiness coming from his owner. But the blonde paid the grouchy cat not even a shred of attention. He had no idea how Marinette had taken it, but he had taken it as a step towards maybe his first ever relationship. It was strange. Adrian had always imagined his first girlfriend to be Ladybug, and though the thought still lingered in the back of his mind and seemed nice, he was much more elated about Marinette becoming that special girl in his life. She hadn't made a move to talk about exactly what had happened that night, so Adrian didn't push things, allowing her to go at her own pace of figuring out feelings, especially with the recent breakup with Aiden. In other news, I honestly got so inspired by the stars. I think I'm going to make a star collection for New York, Marinette rambled while they walked to class. Adrian nodded as she talked. I'm thinking darker colors, like navy or black with silky fabrics and like maybe some mesh, she continued. Adrian again nodded along. Gabriel Agreste, the famous fashion designer, may be his father, but it was clear that the creative design genes had skipped a generation. Adrian didn't exactly know what Marinette was talking about. Inseams and gathers were lost onto him, but it was nice to hear her chatter excitedly. Gone were the days where she sputtered and stuttered in front of him. She was calm, cool, and collected now. I've always wanted to do like a long sleeve fit and flare dress. It would be weirdly great for summer. Oh! Marinette tripped over the threshold of the door, headed to crash onto the ground if Adrian didn't shoot out and grab her arm. Huh, whoops, she said shyly, her cheeks turning red with embarrassment. Adrian used his other arm. Luckily, he had put all of his materials into his bag in the last class, so he was empty-handed, to help her up, holding her up by the shoulders. Chloe snickered at the scene, but Marinette sent her a glare with no other words. Thanks, Marinette said, collecting herself. Her hand brushed over her clothes, smoothing them out. Adrian gave her a gleaming smile and made his way to his spot, The black-haired girl tossed her backpack into her seat and followed Adrien to his spot instead of dealing with a catty Chloe. And clumsy Marinette wakes up from her nap, Alia teased her lightheartedly. You know, I think I'd prefer her to keep sleeping, Marinette shot back. Remember when that was our everyday? The curly-haired brunette poked her friend in the cheek. Ugh, don't remind me. I could have tripped over my own shadow back then. And apparently, I still can. She pulled a face and leaned onto Adrien's side, resting her head onto his shoulder. He chuckled and patted her gently on the head. It's okay, the blonde consoled her. Alia snapped a photo with a giggle and pulled Nino back to their spot. Paparazzis, am I right? Adrien joked to the slumped girl on his shoulder. She smiled brightly at him. You're used to it. After a few minutes of chatting, Marinette ducked off to her desk, facing very much away from Chloe. The rest of class was boring. The teacher droned on and on about the cell membrane mosaic, or whatever that was. Adrien didn't exactly know. It had something to do with stained glass. Probably. Maybe. The bell couldn't have rung fast enough. Adrien grabbed his bag and trotted with his friends to lunch. The courtyard was loud, with students talking. You already have sketches? That's crazy, Adrien said in awe as Marinette showed them the first drafts of her new line. Girl, you are going to change the world. Alia hugged her best friend tightly. Adrien agreed 100% with that statement. Marinette could give his own father a run for his lots of money, even at age 15. Ooh, New York is so cool, and they're so lucky to have you, Rose cooed over Marinette's work. It seems like the best place ever. What is it like? Please tell us more, and you're going back soon, right? The little blonde-haired girl chirped excitedly. Marinette giggled and nodded her head. Everyone, especially Adrien, leaned in to hear more stories about the runway, backstage, and just about the everyday life in a busy American city. Most of the others had heard some things, but Adrien was more or less in the dark. Every time Marinette talked about it, his mind flew to her and Aiden, or he was just too distracted by her to actually pay attention. Aiden had kindly informed him that he had gone to Minnesota, the state with the country's famous mall. Adrien guessed that the cold state was very different from the business one of New York, which also had a city called New York, funnily enough. Confused. I mean, it looked like a dog, and I don't even know how. But I guess New Yorkers have seen it all, so they didn't even jump when the lady pulled around a raccoon, Marinette said, waving her arms around theatrically. Ah, dang it. He had spaced out again. This was getting to be a really bad habit. To be fair, Marinette's hair was down today, and the wind was blowing through it and fluttering it around the slightest bit behind her, as if she was in a movie. God, she was pretty. Really, really pretty. It was distracting for him, to say the least. Ladybug was like that too. She was so unreal in the first couple of fights as Chat Noir. He had been distracted and gotten hit more times than he would have if he had just kept his eyes on the fight and off her. It was very difficult, but after a while, that hurdle was passed. But it didn't mean that he didn't keep running into trash cans during patrol. Now, Adrien needed to train himself not to stare at Marinette's smooth and silky hair during, say, a test. Easier said than done. Yeah, and now everyone was laughing. Adrien had spaced out again. Suddenly, he felt a slight jab to his side. Turning to his left, he saw a grinning Julika. Everything is normal in New York, she said lowly to him so he wouldn't look as clueless as to what was going on around the table. Adrien nodded and sent her a thankful smile. Are you excited to go back? Alex asked once everyone had calmed down. Marinette sighed dreamily. Oh, yes! Oh my goodness, yes! She said happily. You should take us sometime, like all of us, headed to one whole country. Could you picture that? Alia said, slinging an arm around the Asian girl's shoulders. Ooh! That sounds so fun! Rose said excitedly. Imagine us all on a plane! That would be best! That would be literally the best! Hey, Chris! You got a private jet to take us to America? Alex asked, turning towards Adrien. Adrien felt his cheeks go red. All eyes were on him, and though he was a model and should be used to the feeling, it was still rather odd for him at school. They all looked at him earnestly, but before he could open his mouth, Marinette spoke, saving him like the superhero he knew would. Guys, don't just invite yourself onto his plane, she reminded everyone, who took a second to think. Adrien shook his head, understanding Marinette's well intentions, so they weren't necessary. No, it's fine. If it turns out my family does have a plane, you can all come onto it in a heartbeat, and New York, here we come, he said with a smile and laugh, making the table break out into lively chatter. Huh. A vacation with friends. That seemed like a dream that would never come true. It's not like he went on vacations anyways. Whenever he left, it was for work, and Father was never around to do family bonding time. But what if he went with his friends? These were the people who wanted to spend time with him, laugh with him, and explore the unknown with him. Maybe it could happen years down the road. Perhaps if he could convince Father he could go with them when he graduated from high school. Adrien felt eyes on him, and blinking out of his daydream, he saw Marinette's kind smile being directed towards him. He rubbed the back of his neck with a hand. A nervous smile was sent back to her. Coolly, she turned to chat with Alia, talking more about her designs. You might want to take a breath, Agreste. I can hear your heart thumping, Julika said with a low, teasing tone. Adrien placed a hand on his heart. Indeed, it was going faster than average. Ah, young love, she said, copying one of the many famous phrases of the elder generations. Adrien chuckled. You're literally younger than me, he said. Julika shrugged. I'm an old soul, apparently. Naps sound fun to me, she replied. Adrien agreed. He was always down for a nap, though that seemed to be more of a cat thing than an old soul. He liked cat naps a lot, and even though his life was busy and sleep was a whole other way to escape it all. Either way, if someone gave him a warm bed and cozy blankets and far too many pillows to count, he'd happily snuggle. Maybe cuddling with a certain black-haired, blue-eyed fashion designer was on the table, he'd jump in it in an instant. Not that he'd say that out loud, because that could be taken as creepy. Like, really creepy, so he was not going to say that. Your hair is purple. How much of a grandma are you? Adrien said, pointing to the dip-dyed strands of hair. Julika threw him a look. Cool grandmas have purple hair, she defended herself. Adrien chuckled again, and Julika joined. It was nice, becoming closer friends with someone. Yes, he had a group of friends. Max, Alex, Kim, Nino, Rose, Julika, Alia, Marinette, Milan, Ivan. But he wasn't really close with any of them minus Nino, Marinette, and Alia. And Chloe, she was a case still on hold. Besides, she never really fit into the group. Continuing, it was nice to become closer with another one of his already existing friends. Julika was funny and witty, a little cynical at times, but that evened out his childlike optimism, as Ladybug once said. Soon it was time to go back to class, and it flew by very quickly. Unlike most students, he was disappointed for it to let out. Then again, in more ways than one, he was not a normal student, i.e., superhero model, homeschooled kid, etc. Despite the fact it would get boring and tedious, Adrien enjoyed being around people and, oddly enough, noise. His house was far too quiet. That is, when Plagg wasn't performing a world-shattering, groundbreaking, show-stopping concert about his love of cheese and sometimes his sugar cube. Aside from that, the peace and quiet sometimes got a bit much. Adrien waved goodbye to his friends and slipped into the limo. He took a deep breath. The ride was quiet as always. Gorilla occasionally looked back at him, though. Walking into the main doors of his house, as always, he said, "I'm home." No response, as always. Like every other day, Natalie met him at the top of the stairs, briefing him on his piano hours, fencing practice, and Chinese lessons. He trudged up to his room. It was big and could hold one heck of a party. Well, it had before, but it didn't really end up being a total rager. "I'm hungry," Plagg cried out as soon as the door was closed and whizzed off to his stack of cheese. As always. He knocked out the homework in no time. You'd think the peace and quietness would help a boy focus on his work, but it was very much the opposite. Adrien was feeling antsy. He wanted the sun to set immediately so he could leave. Alas, the sun did not want to move. Screw the sun. All it did was provide life and light. He tried staying still, but it was far too difficult. Tiredly, Adrien made his way to the piano. Maybe by practicing some of his pieces, the time would pass by faster. The careful scrutinizing of his fingers as he played the A sharp as pianissimo distracted his mind for only a moment. He'd been getting sloppy in his playing, and, well, that had happened before, and his father found out, and, well, it was goodbye to the slow-moving sun for 2 weeks. It was time to focus, connecting the slurs, form a sentence with the notes, phrase. Do not bash the chords. He was off-tempo. There was too much on his mind, too much guessing on the eighth notes, which would not do for his father. Every line he focused on each note, accent, and beat. He played the quarter note as if it was dotted. The pedal flip wasn't quick or smooth enough. The metal bounced back as if it was angry with his mistake. No. The emphasized notes were on the 16th notes in the middle of the phrase. He came in a little too late on measure 79. Even while playing, Adrien dissected, prodded, and critiqued every infinitesimal thing. Goodness, this song was too slow, too thought-provoking. Adrien needed something with, say, a faster tempo. Something allegro. More staccatos. Perhaps more jumping up and down the keys. Less smooth legato, broken chords in a dramatized manner. He shifted through the books of music on his piano, and in the bench. Mozart? No. 17 classics for kids? How long has this been in the bench? Probably long enough to collect dust. What else did he have? Bach? No. Piano Sonata number 3? No. Dear God, did he have anything other than classical music used to lull babies to sleep? Apparently so. Never mind. Adrien could find something else to entertain himself with for the time being. 我知道了，谢谢。我不会。老师再见啦。Adrien sighed and shut the door. He had a sub for Mandarin today, and they were very concerned with his accents. He appreciated it, of course. But like every other 15-year-old teenager, he didn't want to bother with them, at least not today. Then again, a misaccent on one word could make the sentence completely change. God, Mandarin was really hard. But Adrien was tired, reserving his energy to hop across town in T-minus 30 minutes. It was time for supper, and then afterwards he could be off as soon as darkness began to spread over the buildings of Paris. The chef made stir-fry today. It was good. Dinner was, as usual, quiet, lonely. His father was in his office, as always, working hard as he always did. Natalie was probably helping him or managing things on the computer. Gorilla? Well, he just wasn't around. Adrien didn't even know where his bodyguard retreated to. Nonetheless, he finished his meal quickly. There's no need to linger at the table. There's no one to talk to. No father to explain his day to. No mother to tell his dreams to. Smiling broadly for the first time since he got home, Adrien raced to his room, packed some extra cheese in his pockets for Plag's inevitable cravings, and got ready to transform. He was headed to Marinette's tonight. Well, he was at her place almost every night. It was nice. She allowed him to come, and she made him feel less lonely and everything. And every once in a while, her arm would brush across his, or she'd pet him like a real cat, and it made him purr happily. "Kid, you've got it bad. I mean, you're whipped," Plag said with a smirk. Adrien rolled his eyes at his Kwame. For the record, he knew he was whipped by two different girls nonetheless. The lovely Ladybug and darling Marinette. Ladybug may hold a piece of his heart forever, but that didn't stop him from pursuing Marinette in his cat and superhero way, at least. She was still refocusing from a breakup, and he wouldn't take advantage of that. But it didn't stop him from trying to be the best friend he could be to her. Most long-lasting relationships came from close friendships, so this was just the way to go. Besides, he had more of a chance of dating Marinette than his superhero partner. Of course, he was going to do whatever he could do to get something to work. "I'm charging you for overtime," Plag said pointedly, right before he got sucked into the ring. The familiar feeling of skin-tight black leather over his body returned. Reaching up, there were the black cat ears, twisting from the slight brush through. His tail whipped around the slightest bit. Adrien, but now Chat Noir, grinned widely. The world seemed brighter and less shadow-dominated the moment he put on the suit. Chat could go wherever he gosh darn well pleases. He didn't have to shut up and be secluded all day. He could actually go and see his friends. And he was going to go see Marinette, the dearest one in his heart.